I want you to picture something for a second. It's, say, 3 in the morning. The house is completely quiet.
Okay.
And you wake up, maybe from a strange dream, and the room is just dark. You look at your hand lying on the covers, just barely visible in the moonlight, and you have that sudden vertiginous feeling, that slide into existential dread where you ask the question that, usually only toddlers or philosophers ask. You look at that hand and think, what is this? And what exactly am I?
The hand, or are you asking about the thing looking at the hand?
Both. I mean, that's the whole problem, isn't it? The hand, the brain thinking about the hand, the me inside the brain watching the hand. It's the universal question. Am I the hand? Am I just the firing neurons? Or am I something else entirely that's just renting the equipment?
You're describing the classic ghost in the machine problem. It is, I think, the fundamental anxiety of being human. We feel like we're pilots inside some kind of biological mech suit.
Exactly. And that's the default setting for most of us, right? I grew up thinking I have a body, which is the vehicle. It's got a shelf life. It breaks down. It gets wrinkles.
Right.
And then there's me, the soul, the spirit, the ghost, whatever you want to call it, trapped inside. And the whole point of life, at least religiously speaking, was to keep the ghost clean so that when the machine finally breaks, the ghost can, fly away to a better place.
That is the standard Western cultural assumption. It's very intuitive. It feels true because we so often feel at odds with our bodies. The body gets tired when we want to keep working.
Oh, absolutely.
The body gets sick when we want to go on vacation.
Yeah.
So naturally, we just assume we're two different things sort of stuck together.
It feels incredibly true. But then, and this is why we're here today, you start digging into the sources. You open the Bible, which is supposed to be the user manual for all this stuff, and you realize the manual doesn't seem to agree with the intuition.
It really doesn't. And that's where things get, messy. Because you'll find verses that talk about a soul. You'll find verses that talk about a spirit.
Right.
And sometimes they seem completely interchangeable. Other times they seem like they're opposing forces. And suddenly you aren't just a pilot in a machine anymore. You're, a layer cake of metaphysics, and you don't even know which layer is actually you.
That is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to strip down that engine. We're looking at what the scholars call a canonical whole Bible anthropology.
Which is just a very fancy way of saying we're going to look at the whole timeline, from the dust of Genesis all the way to the Greek-speaking world of the New Testament, to figure out how the manual actually describes the human being.
And the sources are very clear that this isn't about abstract philosophy or what they call Greek substance stacking.
Right. We aren't trying to draw a diagram of invisible organs here. The goal, according to our research, is to look at development, to look at growth and regression.
In what, though?
Within the personal components. The soma, the body, the psyche, the soul, and the pneuma, the spirit. Because how you define these parts, how you see them working together, that dictates how you understand your own maturity.
Okay, so we're going to look at the raw data, the distributional evidence. To kick this off, you have a framework. You said this is where we have to start.
We do. Because usually when people try to figure this out, they have a kind of hierarchy in their heads. They think body's the bottom, that's the bad, fleshy part. Soul is in the middle, that's the personality, the mind. And spirit is at the top, that's the holy, God-connected part.
Like a 3-story house.
Exactly. Like a 3-story house where you're always trying to move from the basement to the attic.
Get out of the basement, get into the attic. That's the goal.
And that is largely influenced by Greek dualism, which we will definitely get to. But if you look at the distribution of the words themselves in the Bible, how often they're used and where, you see a totally different trajectory. It's not a vertical stack. It's more like a timeline of expansion. Yes. You start in the Old Testament with the Hebrew view. The whole person. There is no split. You are a unified chunk of life.
Okay.
Then you move into the New Testament and you get the spirit-renewed person. And finally, you look toward the end, the eschaton, and you see the resurrection-integrated person.
So the thesis here, the big idea, is that the Bible develops these concepts, soul and spirit, not to give us a biology lesson on our invisible parts.
No, not at all.
But to show us a practical path to maturity.
Precisely. It's all about aligning love, life, and light. It's functional.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start at the very beginning, the Hebrew baseline. Because the sources say we have some serious debunking to do, especially about the soul.
We do. And to understand this, we have to, for a moment, unlearn English.
Yeah.
If I say the word soul to you or to anyone listening, what's the first image that comes to mind?
Something wispy, ethereal, maybe, I don't know, a glowing blue orb or a translucent version of myself.
Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Exactly. It has no weight. It can walk through walls. It's the real me that doesn't need to eat or sleep.
Right. It's defined by what it lacks. It lacks physicality. But the original Hebrew word that we translate as soul nephesh is the absolute opposite of that. It is defined by its physicality.
How so?
If you look at the etymology, the root of nephesh isn't spirit or essence. It's throat.
Throat. As in the body part in my neck.
Literally the esophagus, the gullet, the neck,
Yeah.
the channel for breath and food.
Okay, hold on a second. You're telling me that when King David writes in the Psalms, "Bless the Lord, O my soul," she's poetically saying, "Bless the Lord, O my esophagus."
In a very real poetic sense, yes.
Yeah.
Think about what the throat represents in an ancient survival-based culture. The throat is the open channel.
Right. Air in, food down.
It's where the air comes in. It's where food goes down. It is the site of absolute vulnerability and absolute need. If you slice the nephesh, you die. If you don't feed the nephesh, you die.
No, it's not the part of me that is immortal and needs nothing. It's the part of me that is desperate and needs everything.
Precisely. That is the key insight that just changes everything. The Hebrew soul is not the immortal battery that runs the toy. It is the toy itself in its state of total dependency. The nekesh is the thing that breathes and eats and thirsts.
So by extension.
By extension, nephesh came to mean a living being, life itself, or even appetite or desire. When the Bible says a soul longs for something, it's a very physical, gut-level word.
That completely flips the script because I always think of my soul as the God part of me, the part that's high and holy and above all this messy physical stuff. But you're saying nephesh is the hungry part of me.
It is the hungry part. It is the thirsty part. It is the breathing part. In fact, here is the data point that usually makes people drop their coffee mugs.
Okay, money.
In the book of Genesis, when God creates the animals, the cattle, the creeping things, the beasts of the field, the text calls them nephesh haya, living souls.
Wait, the cows are souls.
The cows are nephesh, the fish are
Yeah.
nephesh, the birds are nephesh.
I feel like I need to call my Sunday school teacher right now. I was explicitly told that the difference between humans and animals is that humans have souls and animals don't. That was the big defining line.
And that is the Greek influence talking, which we're going to get to in a minute. But if you're standing in the Hebrew baseline, a cow is a breathing, eating, living being. Therefore, it is a nephesh. A human is a breathing, eating, living being. Therefore, Adam is a nephesh.
So the distinction isn't that I have one and the cow doesn't.
No, the distinction is what kind of nephesh you are. An image of God-bearing nephesh.
So grammatically speaking, I shouldn't say I have a soul.
Correct. According to the Old Testament, you should say, I am a soul.
That feels so much more earthy, grounded.
It is extremely earthy. That's the whole point. When God breathes into the dust man, Adam, in Genesis 2, the text says he became a living nephesh. He doesn't receive a nephesh like it's an accessory. The equation is simple. Dust plus divine breath equals living soul.
Okay, so if the nephesh is the whole package, the animated body, what is the thing that animates it? Because my battery analogy has to fit in here somewhere, right? There's a power source.
There is. And that brings us to the second key Hebrew word, ruach.
Ruach. That's the one I know as spirit, but it's also wind.
Breath, wind, spirit.
Yeah.
It's the animating force. It's the energy. The distributional evidence is really interesting here. Nephesh appears about 750 times in the Old Testament. Ruach appears about 378 times.
So nephesh is by far the dominant category.
Yes, because the Old Testament's primary focus is on the living person in the world, the nephesh. The ruach is the power source. It represents the divine empowering presence, or simply the life breath that keeps the nephesh going.
So the core Hebrew model is human equals animated body, a dust creature powered by breath.
That's it. Loss of breath, loss of ruach, means the nephesh ceases to function as a living being. It returns to dust. Death. This establishes a whole person baseline. Before we ever get to Plato and Greek philosophy, the Bible establishes that you are a unified entity. You don't have a body. You are a body. You don't have a soul. You are a soul.
Okay, so if the baseline is so clear, we're unified living beings, how did we get so confused? How did we end up with this idea of the soul being a separate, floaty ghost? Who broke the model?
We can probably blame the city of Alexandria, Egypt, around 2 or 3 centuries before Jesus was born.
Okay, set the scene for us. What's happening in Alexandria?
Imagine a massive cultural and intellectual melting pot. You have these brilliant Jewish scholars living in a world completely dominated by Greek culture. Alexander the Great has swept through decades earlier. Anyone speaks Greek. Greek philosophy is the currency of the day.
Right.
And these Jewish scholars have a problem. They have their holy text, the Hebrew scriptures, but the younger generation,
Right.
they only speak and read Greek.
It's the classic immigrant parent struggle. The kids don't know the mother tongue.
Exactly. So they decide to undertake this massive project, translate the Hebrew scriptures into Koine Greek. This project is what we now call the Septuagint, or the LXX.
And this is where the wires get crossed.
This is where the pivot happens. They come to this very earthy, physical Hebrew word, nephesh, the throat, the life, the whole being. And they need to find a Greek equivalent.
So they're looking for a word that means life or self.
And the word they land on is psyche.
Which we all know. Psychology, the human psyche.
Right. But here is the fundamental friction. To a Hebrew reader, nephesh meant integrated body life. But to an educated Greek person in Alexandria, someone who had been reading Plato's psyche meant something totally different.
What did it mean to them?
For Plato, the psyche was a prisoner.
A prisoner.
A prisoner of the body. Plato famously played with words, equating the Greek word soma, which means body, with zema, which means tomb.
The body is a tomb.
The body is a tomb. For him, the psyche is this.
But the sources make a really interesting and crucial point here. They say that while the Bible uses the Greek vocabulary, it tries to fill it with Hebrew theology.
That is the key insight. The biblical authors don't just surrender to Plato. They hijack his words. They take the word psyche and say, no, we aren't going to use this to mean an immortal ghost. We are going to bend it to mean the Hebrew concept of the living self. But it's not a static thing. There's a development. The concept actually evolves through what the scholars call progressive semantic elevation.
Progressive semantic elevation. That sounds like corporate speak for getting a promotion. What does that actually mean?
It just means the concept grew up. It got more complex and sophisticated over time. It started as throat breath, a very concrete physical thing.
Right.
Then it expanded to mean whole person life. Then as we move into the New Testament era and the thought becomes more abstract, it becomes the conceptual self, your inner life. And finally, in eschatological thought, it becomes the eschatological subject, the essential you that endures.
So it's not that the writers were changing their minds about what a person is. It's more like the resolution of the image was getting higher. The focus was getting sharper.
Exactly. And that high-resolution image really comes into sharp focus when we hit the New Testament. And this is where the distributional evidence, the word counts, shift dramatically.
You mentioned earlier that in the Old Testament, nephesh, or soul, was the big word, the dominant word. But looking at the New Testament stats, wow, it's a complete reversal.
The frequency completely flips. In the New Testament, the word pneuma, spirit, is used about 403 times. The word psyche, soul, drops to only about 47 times.
That is a massive takeover. It's not even close. Pneuma essentially pushes psyche right off the stage. Why? What happened?
What happened is that the theological center of gravity shifted. The Old Testament was largely about natural life, creating a people, giving them a land, establishing a physical lineage. That's the domain of the nephesh, the psyche. But the New Testament's central story is about new creation life. It's about being born again, a spiritual birth. That is the domain of the pneuma. The main story has changed, so the main character in our anthropology has to change too.
Okay, so we need to define our terms very, very carefully here for the New Testament context, because this is where people, myself included, really get tripped up.
Absolutely. In the New Testament, psyche generally refers to natural life, your individual selfhood, your emotional and volitional center. It's closely tied to your biological, earthly identity. You have a psyche just by virtue of being born. You could be an atheist and have a very complex and interesting psyche.
And pneuma?
Pneuma is God-oriented life. It is the capacity for, or the reality of, divine indwelling. It is the principle of the new creation working in you. This is the life you possess, not by being born, but by being reborn, by being connected to God through his spirit.
So pneuma isn't just a higher part of the soul or a more refined soul. It's a completely different frequency of life.
I like that. A different frequency. Or think of it like this. Your psyche is the hardware and the base operating system that comes with the phone when you take it out of the box.
Okay, I can run with that.
The pneuma is the Wi-Fi connection that connects you to the cloud.
That's good. I like that. So the phone works without the Wi-Fi. You can still play games, take pictures, use the calculator. That's the psyche life.
Correct.
But it's not doing what it was ultimately designed to do until it connects to that larger network. It's limited.
Exactly. And just to round out the trio here, what about the soma, the body? Because if pneuma is now the star of the show, does the body get sired? Does the New Testament finally go back to Plato and say, okay, let's just dump the tomb?
Which is what a lot of people think Christianity teaches.
It is. But no, and this is absolutely crucial. The New Testament never reverts to that Greek idea that the body is a disposable shell or a prison. In resurrection theology, the body isn't discarded, it's transformed. Paul calls it a spiritual body.
Which always sounds like an oxymoron to me, like dry water or jumbo shrimp.
It does. But what it means is a body that is fully powered and governed by the spirit, the pneuma, rather than one that's driven merely by the natural appetites of the soul, the psyche. It's not a ghost. It's a body that runs on a completely different, higher-octane fuel source.
So the key distinction the scholars are detecting here is between life you possess by being born versus life you possess by being connected to God, the natural versus the supernatural.
That's the core distinction. And this leads us directly into the biggest debate in this whole field. The debate that splits theologians and just completely confuses regular people. Are we three distinct parts or are we one whole?
The trichotomy debate.
Trichotomy versus the unified person.
Okay, let's set the stage for this fight. In the blue corner, we have trichotomy. The idea that a human being is three distinct, separable slices. Body, soul, and spirit. And I have to admit, I'm a bit partial to this one because I like categories. It feels organized. I like the idea that I have three distinct buckets to sort myself into.
It is very organized. It's neat, it's tidy, it's attractive, and its proponents have a heavy hitter text on their side. The anchor text is 1 Thessalonians 5:23. Paul writes, "May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless."
Boom. 1, 2, 3. It sounds like an anatomy chart. Spirit, soul, and body. Case closed.
It does. And then for backup, you have Hebrews 4:1, which talks about the Word of God being sharp enough to divide soul and spirit.
Which implies they must be separable. If you can cut between them, they have to be two different things.
That's the argument. So that's the trichotomy view.
Yeah.
But the sources we looked at call this a stress test. Because when you take that strict trichotomy model, the idea that we are three separate substances, like three distinct organs in our spiritual anatomy, and you try to apply it to the whole Bible, the model starts to crack. It doesn't hold up.
Okay, so where does it break? What's the first crack?
Well, first, you run into the identity problem. If the soul and spirit are completely separate substances, where is you, the essential you? Is your memory in your soul or your spirit?
I would guess. Soul, that's the mind, right?
Okay, but what about your conscience? Is that in your soul or your spirit?
Spirit. That feels more spiritual. But wait, my soul has to remember things I did wrong for my conscience to work. If I get dementia, does my spirit forget God? It gets very messy, very fast.
It does. But the biggest crack in the model comes from the overlap problem. The Bible itself just doesn't keep these categories as neat as the model wants them to be.
What do you mean?
If you believe your spirit is the God part and your soul is just the mind and emotion part, what do you do with a verse like Mary's Magnificat? In Luke's gospel, she says, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior."
She uses them in parallel, like she's saying the same thing twice, for emphasis.
Exactly. Is her soul doing the religious work, or is her spirit? It seems like they're both doing the exact same thing. Or, take the great commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
That's 4 parts.
That's 4. Did we just invent quadcotomy? Where does mind fit in the body, soul, spirit model? Is it part of the soul, separate?
I see the problem. If we try to map these as distinct organs on a chart, we keep running into parts that don't fit.
And that brings us to the biggest problem of all, the cardia factor. Cardia is the Greek word for heart.
Right.
If we are strictly a 3-part being, body, soul, and spirit,
Right.
where does the heart fit in?
I always just assumed heart was a poetic word for the soul, like they're synonyms.
And sometimes they're used that way, but often they're not. In the Bible, the cardia often functions as the control center for the whole person. It's used for thinking, willing, and deciding. It's the place from which you believe or have faith.
So it's the command center?
It is. So if the heart is what thinks and decides, is it a 4th part? The strict three-part model collapses under the weight of the biblical text itself. It's just not that simple.
Okay, so if strict trichotomy fails the stress test, why is it still so popular? Why do I hear it in sermons and read it in books all the time?
Because, and this is the paradox, it is incredibly useful.
Useful how? If it's wrong.
The sources make a critical distinction. They distinguish between ontological trichotomy, what we fundamentally are, which is likely a unified whole,
Okay.
and functional trichotomy, which describes how we work or how we experience ourselves. And as a functional model, it can be brilliant for something they call sanctification mapping.
Sanctification mapping, that sounds like a GPS for spiritual growth.
In a way, it is, and it's really helpful in what the sources call pastoral diagnostics. Think about it this way. You're a pastor or just a friend talking to someone who's really struggling. They are feeling a deep, heavy darkness. They can't pray. They feel totally numb to God.
Okay. I've been there. I think we all have.
If you're a strict trichotomist, believing the spirit and soul are totally separate, sealed-off compartments, you might diagnose that situation incorrectly. You might say to yourself, well, my spirit is perfect and saved and seated with Christ, so this darkness must just be my soul acting up. It's just emotions. It doesn't really matter spiritually.
You disconnect your feelings from your faith.
You compartmentalize. My spiritual life is fine. I'm just depressed. And that leads to people ignoring very real mental health issues because they think it's unspiritual to be sad or anxious.
Right, because that's just the soul bucket, which is separate from the spirit bucket.
Exactly. But if you view yourself as a unified person, where soma, psyche, and pneuma are just different dimensions or layers of you, then that depression is a deeply spiritual reality. Your body's lack of serotonin is directly affecting your spirit's ability to rejoice. It's all connected.
So the cure isn't just pray more, which would be a spirit fix, or just take a pill, which is a body fix.
No.
It's recognizing that the pill might actually help the prayer, and the prayer might help the anxiety that the body is feeling. They work together.
Precisely. The unified person view allows us to treat the human as a whole integrated being, rather than trying to fix the ghost while completely ignoring the machine it's in. So the expert consensus in the sources is a model they call a unified person with layered functions.
Unified person with layered functions. Can you explain that to me like I'm 5?
Okay, imagine one single person, you, expressing yourself through multiple dimensions at the same time. You have a biological dimension, your soma. You have a psychological or personal dimension, your psyche. And you have a God-responsive dimension, your pneuma. But it is always, always you, one unified subject acting through these different layers of your being.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It respects the Hebrew unity, but also acknowledges the New Testament complexity and the different ways we experience ourselves.
Right. And this brings us to the most important part of this whole deep dive. Why does any of this matter? Why does the Bible develop this complex vocabulary over time? Why not just stick with you are a nephesh and call it a day?
The so what factor, the practical application.
Exactly. The sources are clear. Scripture develops these concepts for the intensely practical reason of maturity. They call it love, life, and light maturity.
And how do they define maturity within this unified but layered framework?
Maturity is defined very simply as alignment across layers.
Alignment. I like that. It sounds almost chiropractic, getting your spiritual back in line.
It is, spiritually speaking. It's about getting the soma, psyche, and pneuma to all pull in the same direction. We can actually look at growth and regression in each specific layer, because each layer can go bad or it can go good. It can move toward integration or fragmentation.
Okay, let's do that. Let's start with the foundation, the body, the soma. We all know what a regressed body looks like in the secular world, out of shape, unhealthy. But what does that mean in a biblical sense?
Biblically, regression in the soma is when the body begins to embody sin patterns. It's when your physical habits, your appetites for food or drink, your sexuality, your patterns of speech, your physical lethargy become disordered and start to rule you. The body becomes the master, not the servant.
The tail wagging the dog.
Exactly. But growth or maturity in the soma is when the body becomes what the Apostle Paul calls an instrument of righteousness. It begins to function as a temple for God's Spirit. It aligns with what the sources call resurrection continuity. You start living in the body you will one day have forever.
I love that phrase, instrument of righteousness. It implies utility, a purpose. It's not just about the body looking good or being healthy for its own sake. It's about the body doing good, being useful for love.
Right. A mature body is one that is available for the purposes of love. It's a surrendered body.
Yeah.
It's your hands actually serving someone, your feet actually going somewhere to help. It's embodied. action.
Okay, layer 2, the psyche. The personal life, the self, the soul. This seems like the hardest one to pin down. What does a regressed soul look like?
This is the tricky one, you're right. The soul is your personality, your desires, your ego, yourself. Regression here is described by the sources using a classic theological concept that comes from Martin Luther, self-curvature inward.
Ooh, that's a vivid image. The self collapsing in on itself, like a dying star.
It's the Latin phrase incurvatus in se. It means your desires, your identity, your focus, all of it curves back toward you. That is the very definition of a regressing soul. It is narcissism, yes, but it's also deep anxiety and worry and self-pity. It's an obsession with the self. It is the black hole state of the soul where all light goes in and none comes out.
That really hits home. When I'm in a bad place mentally or emotionally, that's exactly what it feels like. My entire world gets very, very small, and I'm the only thing in it. My problems, my fears.
Exactly. So what does growth in the psyche look like? It's the opposite. It's what the sources call ordered desires. It's having a stable identity that isn't fragile and constantly needing validation. It's moral integration. In short, it's when your soul is ordered toward good.
What do you mean by ordered?
It means you love the right things in the right order. You love people more than you love things. You love God more than you love yourself. Your desires aren't eliminated. They're aimed at the right targets.
That's profound. So maturity isn't about killing your personality or your desires. It's about ordering them so the soul doesn't eat itself alive.
Precisely. And that leads us to the final layer, layer 3, the pneuma, the God relational capacity.
This is the antenna, the Wi-Fi connection from your earlier analogy.
Yes. And regression here is, frankly, scary. The sources use words like hardening, deadness to God, truth resistance. It's having the antenna broken or just covered in static. It's the inability to sense the divine, to hear God's voice.
And growth in the spirit.
That's the good stuff. Illumination, regeneration, sanctification, communion. It is the spirit becoming, as Paul would say, alive to God. It's that moment the Wi-Fi connects and the data finally starts flowing. There's a clear signal.
So putting it all together, what does the synthesis of maturity actually look like when all 3 layers are aligned?
It is not about escaping the body or suppressing the soul. That's the Gnostic trap, the Platonic error. True biblical maturity is about the pneuma, the spirit, which is alive and connected to God governing the psyche, the soul, which is then fully embodied in the soma, the body.
So spirit leads soul and soul leads body, a top-down flow.
And when that flow is working correctly, you have a unified, mature, integrated human being. You are love, life, and light aligned. The spirit informs the soul, ordering its desires outward toward God and others. And the ordered soul then commands the body to act in love and righteousness.
That is a beautiful and practical picture. It really changes how you look at self-improvement. It's not just about fixing my bad habits in the body or finding myself in the soul. It's about alignment. It's about getting the flow right from the top down.
It is. And that brings us to our final high-precision synthesis. We need to recap the trajectory, the story we found in the sources.
Right. We started by busting the Greek hierarchy. The story is not body leads to soul, which leads to spirit, like levels in a video game where you discard the previous level when you move up.
No. That's a hierarchy of value. The biblical trajectory is temporal and expansive. It goes from life, nephesh, to breath, ruach, to divine breath, pneuma, and finally to new creation breath. It's an infusion of higher and higher grades of life.
Or, to put it in those 4 stages of being that we discussed, let's walk through them one last time just to make it crystal clear.
Just one, the living being. That's the Hebrew nephesh. The raw, beautiful, earthy, needy life of Genesis. You are a soul.
Stage 2, the animated being. This is the LXX transition period, where we start to conceptualize the inner self, the psyche, but we run the risk of falling into Greek dualism.
Stage 3, the God indwelt being. This is the New Testament pneuma reality, the game changer, where the very Spirit of God takes up residence within the human structure.
And finally, stage 4, the glorified being, the eschatological integration, the end goal. The resurrection body that doesn't decay, fully and forever fueled by the Spirit.
That is the roadmap of humanity as told by these terms. It's a movement from dust to glory, but at no point do you stop being a human. You just become a more integrated, more fully alive human.
And to come back to the practical question, why does Scripture develop this? Why give us all these different words and concepts? Why not just say, be good?
Because transformation has to occur at all 3 of those experiential layers. It offers us what the source is called pastoral utility. If you don't know the different parts of the engine, You can't fix it when it's running poorly.
Right.
We need to know if a problem we're facing is primarily a body habit, or a disordered soul desire, or a fundamental spirit disconnection from God, so that we can apply the right cure to the right dimension of our being.
Man, this has been, well, it's been a deep dive.
It's a lot to take in, for sure.
It really is. The big takeaway for me is that we are not ghosts in a machine. We are unified beings designed for integration. The goal isn't to dissect ourselves into 100 pieces, but to align ourselves toward God.
Well said. That's the heart of it.
Before we go, though, I want to leave our listener with one final thought, something the sources hinted at that is a little bit provocative, something to chew on at 3 a.m. the next time you wake up.
Okay, let's hear it.
We talked about how the soul, psyche, is your natural life, yourself, your personality, and the spirit, pneuma, is your connection to the new creation, to God.
Right, the container and the connection.
And we talked about that self-curvature, the soul collapsing in on itself when it's disordered.
Yes, the incurvatus in se.
Is it possible that without the spirit, the soul is just a container waiting for its true content?
That is a haunting thought.
Like maybe that deep gnawing emptiness that people feel, that self-curvature, isn't just a psychological glitch. Maybe it's literally the shape of the spirit that is missing from their lives.
So you're saying the soul is shaped like God, and until it is filled by the pneuma, it just collapses on itself. It implodes because it had nothing inside to hold its shape.
Exactly. So for everyone listening, look at your own life. Where is the misalignment? Is the self-curvature of your soul blocking the light of the spirit? And are you trying to fix a spirit-sized hole with a soul-sized solution?
Those are the important questions.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.